Hello and welcome to the channel. As always, like the video, and if you enjoyed the story, leave a comment on if you would want more. This fanfiction was not created by me, but in the description there is a link to the fanfic so you can show your support to the creator and read along. Without any more delay, let's dive into the story.
In her short life, Nia did not have the opportunity to see many things around the world. Up until the Jaldabaoth incident, she had lived a rather sheltered life, never stepping foot outside the Holy Kingdom itself, and residing in her hometown for most of that life. Disregarding that fact, she had still seen many beautiful places within her home country. The royal palace that she had the honor of visiting was truly breathtaking at the time. While she had only been there for a few short hours, she had always imagined that was what the peak of architecture was like. Now she could only laugh at how naive she was. The moment she had stepped through the portal, she simply had no words to describe what she saw. The only thing her mind could reasonably come up with was calling it a haven of the gods. The dimensions of the hallway they were currently walking through were exceedingly large. It could probably fit a small house in the middle and still have room to walk around it. While the size gave her the feeling of being small and insignificant, she had accepted that she was compared to the truly awe-inspiring sights. Pillars that sparkled all the colors of the rainbow from the room's light descended on all sides of the room. While she didn't know what material it was made of, it certainly wasn't cheap. Beautiful pearl white walls made up the sides of the room, etched with gold embroidery, that created truly beautiful works of art. While she wondered if the artistry was truly made of gold, she decided to stop thinking about it, as the splendor of the passage was already becoming too much to bear. But that only meant it was worthy of such a great ruler. Now I see why His Majesty didn't have the dwarves make a palace in Oriental for him. Nothing they could have made would have even held a candle to this place. And to think this is merely a hallway. Miss Baraja? The sound of the undead king's voice suddenly snapped her out of her trance as she realized it was probably rude to not say anything all this while. Why yes, Your Majesty. It seems you have been spacing out all this while. Are you feeling all right? Of course, Ainz Sama. I was merely stunned by the magnificence of this hallway. It far outstrips anything I've seen in my life in terms of beauty. This was not mere flattery, she truly had never seen something so magnificent. In response to this, he simply gave in to a bout of light-hearted laughter. It would seem he was truly happy with what she had said. Ha ha ha, is that so? No, I won't act that way to you, my home truly is incredible, isn't it? Both me and my friends built it together a long time ago, so it can be considered a testament to us as a whole. I will do anything to protect it. For it is the legacy of us all. This voice was filled with great power and determination, and she could not help but feel emboldened after listening to it. Even Touchme, who was beside him, seemed to nod along with him. It would seem all of his friends held the same view as him. You built all of this, Your Majesty? Indeed, with the help of my friends, we created a paradise where all of us and the children could live in peace, and now that some have returned, that may finally come to pass. While he had no facial expressions, she could tell he was giving a warm smile. By the way, Miss Baraja, was it? I'm sorry for suddenly leaving out of the blue when we first met. I was choosing to be cautious since I had no clue where I was or who you were. It's not a problem, I understand it since I now know the story between you two, but if you were so lost, then where did you come from? It's a long story. And with that, the conversation ended, as she could tell he wasn't intent on enlightening her as to what that meant. They soon passed through a gate at the end of the hallway, leading to a spherical room that was covered with indents, where statues of demons stood. Each one looked so lifelike that she almost got into a defensive position from her memories of Jaldabaoth. A large glass dome covered the top of the room, where the symbol of the Sorcerer Kingdom could be seen etched into it. The sunlight that filtered through it only added to its beauty. By the way, Miss Baraja, you seem to have been carrying my staff for quite a while now, is there any reason for that? Nia instantly panicked at the realization that she had been holding on to his staff the whole time, when she should have immediately given it back to him the moment she had the chance. But the decor of the space around her had caused her to lose her train of thought. But who could accept an excuse like that? What am I doing? Why must I be such an idiot? I deeply apologize, Your Majesty. This was the staff you had dropped when you left the kingdom a few days ago, so I had kept it in safekeeping for your return. I should have given it to you the moment you stepped foot into my chambers. That staff is nothing to write home about. I only bring it out for ceremonial purposes. It's just some random accessory that I have imbued with a first-tier spell. You can keep it if you wish, I have too many useless items like that anyways. While the idea of having too much stuff seemed ridiculous to her, she couldn't accept any more of His Majesty's items. Please permit me to refuse. Whatever Your Majesty is choosing to give me as a reward is more than enough. Besides, I wouldn't have much use for a staff. It would just end up becoming one more thing I would need to take care of. Well, I suppose that's true. With that, she had handed over the staff to Ainz, who had thrown it back into his pocket to mention. At the end of the room, they reached a pair of double doors that were so large, it may have been more appropriate to call them a gate. On one side stood a truly beautiful angel that evoked a calming atmosphere, and on the other was a twisted and vile demon that evoked a feeling of violence. It seemed like it would take years just to carve them to such lifelike perfection. As they opened, it led to a grand room that made even the previous areas seem bland in comparison. A long carpet ran from the entrance of the door, all the way down to the end of the room. And at its end, was a glamorous throne that sat atop a dais, which reached all the way to the top of the room itself. 6 spines made of shadow jutted from the sides of the throne, as if centering one's view on its occupant. Beautiful flags, each carrying a symbol that she did not recognize, filled each wall from end to end. How much wealth would one need to create such a place? She would likely never find the answer. Yes, before we continue, Miss Baraja, please wear this for now. As he said this, he handed her a small item which appeared to be a ring of sorts. The item itself had the appearance of a snake eating its own tail, with 2 sapphires in place of its eyes. The item itself also appeared to be forged of solid gold, with it glinting under the lights of the chandeliers above her. That item is known as Asclepius's Blessing. While it has many uses, its main function is to render one immune to all forms of poisons. While this isn't your reward, as I still have use for that ring, you will be required to wear it before we go on any further. Obeying as instructed, she quickly placed the ring over her finger, and the moment she did, it felt like she was completely refreshed. Even the minor pain in her stomach had subsided. Now then, please hold on to me. Greater teleportation. As they were teleporting, Nia had closed her eyes to prepare for any odd feelings that may arise, as well as to prepare for the sudden change in scenery, but she soon found that the action felt like she hadn't even moved. Like it had been the most natural thing in the world. As she opened her eyes, however, she began to wish she had just kept them shut. Before her stood the largest pile of wealth she had ever seen in her short life. No, perhaps this would be the largest pile of wealth to anyone who saw it, as no matter who she thought of, be they emperor or adventurer, she was certain no mortal could feasibly gain this much wealth. Even a dragon may be hard-pressed to gain such a sum. The room was filled to the brim with all sorts of magic items and jewelry that Nia didn't even know was possible to create. There were suits of armor that seemed to be fashioned out of various rare ores and gemstones, a white robe that glittered in the light of the surrounding gold, and looked to be sewn from diamonds, a large dragon skull fashioned out of black diamond, a ruby cap with a letter M inscribed onto it, a statue of an angel that looked to be crafted out of light itself, a tapestry of a dragon burning down a castle with flames that seemed to be moving in real time when one viewed them that was labeled Shrade, a coat made entirely out of phoenix feathers, a obsidian table that held a crystal ball in its center that seemed to be surrounded by floating motes of light, a drinking glass formed out of the hand of a dragon, a statue large beast made out of molten rock, a rose that was formed with a stem of opal and petals of fire, and many more. This is the treasury, Miss Baraja. Please, urge you to take something of your choice. He had said this so calmly, she honestly thought it was sarcasm for a moment. But as he began to stand there in silence, she realized he was not joking. Hiya. Please wait, Your Majesty. This is way too much. I could not in good faith take one of these treasures from you, please reconsider. While this room may only exist to most in a thief's dreams, she honestly didn't want the pressure of taking anything. She had already received far too much, and from the king of another nation no less. It's fine. These trinkets are hardly valuable. Besides, you've done so much for me without expecting anything in return, so it's only natural that I would return the favor. Hearing him say that life-sized sculpture of a woman holding up a flower carved from solid gold was hardly valuable caused her eye to twitch for a moment. And as she was about to object again, Ainz quickly put up a hand to end her argument before it even began. I'd be rather upset if you didn't take anything, you know? NGH. While she knew that she was being foolish, as this came down to her own feelings rather than logic, but she could not bear to see the great man she admired be unhappy. And it would be a waste to come all this way and not take something, then I would have just wasted His Majesty's time. After some minor deliberation in her head, she finally decided to accept. Very well, Your Majesty, I will accept this honor you have bestowed upon me. It's not an honor, just repaying you what I owe. Now, please pick out whatever you wish. While the pressure of picking something had worried her, it was now added to the pressure of trying to pick something within a reasonable time frame. How can I choose one article when everything looks so expensive? I should probably find something that looks relatively tame. After searching for some time, she came across a band that was silver in color and was surrounded in white etching. Unlike most of the items here, it did not glow with power, or appear overly garish, but was instead a normal piece of jewelry that a noble may wear. Your Majesty, I think I'll go with this ring here. Ah, so that is your choice? That is the ring known as Icarus's gift. Once per day, it allows the user to grow wings for 30 minutes to be able to fly for an unlimited period during that time, and once it expires, they will quickly burn up in flames, which depending on your position can be quite precarious. So even simple items here are so amazing? Since it would be rude to refuse it after hearing its effect, she had no choice but to see it through. Your Majesty, I am eternally grateful for this gift. I will be sure to use it effectively in your name. I'm glad to hear it. Then if that is all, let us head back to the throne room. Once again they had cast greater teleportation to exit the veritable sea of gold and back into the realm of wonder that was the Sorcerer King's home. Well then, Miss Baraja, I should be able to arrange a gate for you to head back before anyone notices your absence. So if that is all, I wish you, Before he could finish his sentence, it seemed like the Sorcerer King was notified of something, given the way he suddenly cocked his head to the side. This was soon confirmed as he put his middle and index fingers to his temple, and began to utter such things like I see, and of course, while Nia couldn't be sure, it was most likely the message spell. Miss Baraja, before you go, it would seem that Shizu wishes to speak with you. Are you able to do so at this time? This thoroughly unexpected announcement made her quite happy. It had been quite a while since she had seen her, since the end of the war in fact. Therefore this was a truly happy time for her. Of course, Your Majesty, tell her I'll see her as soon as I can. Wonderful, then Decrement, could you please lead Miss Baraja to the Pleiades' private room? Seemingly out of nowhere, a truly gorgeous woman made her way to the group. While she wasn't as pretty as, say, Albedo, her looks were still truly astonishing compared to anyone Nia had seen. As you will at Ainz-sama, it shall be done. Baraja-sama, please follow me. While it made her nervous to be referred to with such a title, she endured it unhappily obliged the maid, but couldn't help but wonder, how did His Majesty acquire all these amazing people? So that's what she's really like, huh? Cute. Ainz couldn't help but agree with his friend by giving a small sound. After she had left the chamber. The way she acted loyal yet nervous gave her a lot of parallels with Mare, and he found the attitude to be utterly adorable. Of course he would never say such things to her or others. He had an image to protect after all. Seeing that they had run out of things to talk about with her gone, Ainz decided to bring back up the topic of leaving this world. Now that we have the chance, Touch Me, I'd like to discuss how you may be able to leave this world. Touch Me instantly put his full focus on Ainz, as he didn't want to miss an opportunity, nor miss knowledge to help him find his way back. Unfortunately, we know very little about anything that could have caused this disturbance that brought us here, but what I have learned is that it has only began recently. 600 years ago at the earliest. So while we may not know anyone who knows what happened to us, we would have to find a being who has lived for that long to tell us how this occurred. Touch Me began to nod along with what he was saying, as it was making a lot of sense to him, but therein still lie the problem of not knowing if they had a way back at all.
Do you know anyone who has lived for that long?
No, we haven't thus far, but if anyone were to know, it would be Demiurge. Once Ulbert is done talking with him, we should ask him about our future movements as well as any long-lived individuals. But we have to be careful, since he seems to think I already know this, so he tends to be coy with his answers.
I see.
But we still have to try. Then let's wait another hour and see if they have finished their discussion, then we'll just head for whoever he points us to.
Right.
So before that, let me tell you about some of the things I've noticed about this world. And once again, Ainz dove into the pastime he so deeply missed, of talking with his friends about random topics, which caused him to feel quite happy.
Please guys, if these two could make it, then that means you can too.
Please, let more of you be summoned here that are willing to stay with me.
I need you. This is the Pleiades meeting room, Baraja-sama.
And with that, I bid you farewell. As the maid named Decrement bowed and took her leave, Nia began to walk towards the large oak door with golden inlays. While she had passed all sorts of wondrous sights on her way here, it still shocked her to see such beautiful works of art everywhere she went. She slowly approached the entrance and gave a light knock. After a few seconds had passed, she wondered if anyone had even heard her, but as she went to knock once again, the door opened, revealing a tall woman with black hair that was put into a bun, and glasses on her almost pure white face. Her outfit seemed to be a type of maid outfit with armored pieces on the hips and shoulder. While Nia was initially confused as to why she recognized this person, it soon came to her that she was one of the maid demons that had accompanied Jaldabaoth when he first appeared to her. She instinctively went on guard, but soon remembered that they were all under the command of Ainz-sama, therefore she should treat her with a level of respect.
Greeting, you must be Shizu's friend Nia, I take it? I am Yuri Alpha, the eldest of the Pleiades, please come in.
Thank you, that I will do so. As she followed behind Yuri, she noticed the room they were in was quite small compared to the previous ones. The only things it contained were a couch near the side of the room and the table set in the center, where the rest of the maids seemed to be eating. Nia's quiet, monotone voice soon rang through her ears, and she knew who it was already without even looking.
Shizu-senpai. It's good to see you again after all this time. She quickly hugged the former maid demon, which was soon reciprocated by the other party.
It's good to see you too. Here. Drinks. She then grabbed a bottle from that pocket space of hers, much like she had done when they first met, and set it in front of a chair by the table. The table was already practically overflowing with food as is, and the addition of the drink probably did nothing to the already staggering amount of sweets, but she felt like the table would collapse at any moment. As she sat down beside Shizu, she couldn't help but gaze at the dorms of the others who were also present. Just like Shizu, their beauty was almost sculpted, reaching a height that no human could realistically attain.
Let me introduce you. This is Yurine.
She is the older sister of us all.
Though I've already introduced myself, it's nice to meet you, Miss Baraja.
Ah, just Nia is fine, Alpha-san. Nia found it odd that they referred to each other as sisters, given the varying difference in appearance, and seemingly race in some cases. It must have been a sign of care as opposed to actual family.
If that is the case, then I would be honored for you to call me Yuri.
With both parties seemingly coming to an understanding with a quick nod of the head, Shizu continued the introductions.
That's Lupus Regina. She is second eldest.
The person in question had fair brown skin with red hair that was tied on both sides. Unlike some of the others, her outfit was seemingly bereft of any armaments, though knowing the level of power they all possessed, being a rating of 150, it most likely was not weak.
Hey
I hear you helped Shizu-chan during the invasion of Jaldabaoth. So sorry about all the people that died, but you can't avoid it. I guess pleasure to meet you, Sue. Seeing as all the previous encounters with the maids had been relatively tame with calm personalities, the contrast of the extremely outgoing personality of Lupus Regina was quite a shock. Though she was somewhat annoyed with the carefree nature that she spoke about her people, she didn't let it show. "Ah, the pleasure's all mine, Lupus Regina-san.
It's nice to meet you as well.
Lupu, you shouldn't act that way in front of guest. Is not very befitting of a battle maid." "It's fine, Yurine, besides she knows I'm just joking, right?" Though her smile was a friendly one, it seemed to be hiding something more behind it that Nia couldn't place. As she was suddenly put on the spot by her, all she could do was croak out a "why yes." "Ha!" As Yuri sighed in defeat, Shizu continued on with her spiel. "Over there is Narbaral. Both her and Solution share the title of third oldest. While both Shizu and Yuri had armored pieces on them, Narbaral's outfit seemed to be fashioned for combat. Most of the materials seemed to be metal, with it covering most of her actually outfit. While Nia imagined that it would be difficult to move in, she must have been used to it if she always wore this.
Greetings, Bag. Nia, it is nice to meet you.
As you have just heard, I am Narbaral Gamma, and this is Solution Epsilon." The black-haired beauty motioned to the one sitting next to her, which was a woman with blonde curled hair whose outfit seemed to leave nothing to the imagination.
Regardless, it still looked to be a very expensive article of clothing. "Era, so it's my turn now? Greetings, Nia, it is a pleasure to finally meet you. According to Shizu, you two seem to have a lot of fun during the fight against Jaldabaoth?"
"While I don't know if I would call it fun, we did work well together during that time.
And it's a pleasure to meet the both of you as well." With only one member being unaccounted for, Shizu gave the final introduction, "And this here is Entoma, our little sister."
Her appearance was the oddest out of the sisters. Her outfit closely resembled a strange form of clothing in the south known as a kimono.
Her hair was a dark red, put into two chignons.
The strangest part about her, however, was her face.
It never seemed to move.
While the other's beauty appeared to be sculpted, hers appeared to be that in the literal sense, as it reminded her of a doll.
This must be the insect maid Blue Rose spoke of. While the outfit covered any visible skin, by process of elimination, it had to be her. A sudden crack sound snapped Nia out of her thoughts, however.
It would appear the cause was the head of the maid snapping from Nia to Shizu in an instant.
"I think you mean that you're the youngest, right?" "No, you."
Entoma responded with making high-pitched chirping sounds in an attempt to be threatening while raising her arms, but the contrast between her adorable look and her display of dominance made her seem more cute than anything else.
Shizu then took a fighting stance as if prepared to engage in a round of fisticuffs. "This isn't good.
Are they about to start a fight here?" She began to panic at the position she was in. Being in between two beings of jaw-dropping power about to clash with each other was the last place she wanted to be. Just as she was preparing to move, a loud clapping sound echoed through the room, which drew the attention of all parties to the source, being Yuri. "You two, while I know you're just playing, our guest here may not understand that.
Could you perhaps continue this little spat another time?" "Oops, sorry, Nia."
It's fine, really. Just a little caught off guard is all." While she was trying to hide her fear from that little exchange, it had reminded her that everyone in this room would be an opponent that Blue Rose would be hard-pressed to beat. The fear of being caught in a brawl between two was quite palpable.
"Sorry." Entoma gave a cheerful reply as she bit into the meal in front of her. Nia couldn't tell what food it was, but it seemed oddly familiar. "Entoma, what are you eating there?" "Human."
She thought she was joking at first, but soon realized why it was so familiar to her. Upon closer inspection, it appeared to be the arm of a person that had been cooked in some way. An immediate wave of revulsion came over her, as would anyone seeing their own species being devoured before them. "It's okay though, they had opposed Ainz-sama, so I was allowed to feast on them."
"I'm not supposed to feed on innocents. That's not the issue here. And are all of you okay with that?"
"I have no opinions on what happens to inferior lifeforms, Gallinipper, outside the Great Tomb. Those who have worth like you are exempt from that, however."
"Humans taste quite good, honestly.
So I see no issue with it."
"If they had choose to oppose Ainz-sama, then that's what they deserve, Sue."
"I do wish she wouldn't eat so rudely, but if it's belonged to the opposition of Nazarick, then I have no complaints. Seeing that they were all of the same opinion, Nia worriedly looked to Shizu to get a grasp on her opinion, and saw her face was as neutral as always. But with her keen sight, she could notice a very minor grimace on her, which showed she was not very adverse to the act, though whether she felt anything for the one being eaten remained to be seen. If you don't want me to eat this, then I have some other food here if you wish. After saying so, she began to reach into the front of her outfit in what was presumably a pocket.
Denied. This had been said by Shizu with a surprising amount of force. It would seem that this alternative was even worse, so she decided that it would be best not to ask what they were. Yeah, Enchan, I don't want to watch you eat cockroaches while we're talking here. Kyohoku's family are so creepy, Yano? While I don't necessarily hate them as you do, it would be best for us all for you to not do that, Enchan. And Archan, Lupu, why are you being so mean? I was just trying to help our guest. Please, I don't mind, continue. Nia had immediately understood Shizu's forceful tone from before and gave that curt answer with a similar amount of panic. She had honestly wished it wasn't brought up at all, as imagining the act was almost enough to send her over the edge. Seeing it would definitely not end well. So all she could do was bear through it. She would have to adopt the mindset that since they were against Ainz, they were worthy of this punishment. Well, now that introductions are out of the way, would we like to continue our discussion? Oki, you were discussing how things were progressing with your orphanage, weren't we, Yurine? While I'd hardly call it mine as the Supreme One built it, I was just given the privilege of managing it, but as I was saying, it seems to be going just as Ainz-sama hoped. I and Pestonia take care of the children while Negrito deals with the infants. While nothing has happened yet in terms of talents, we will soon begin to implement measures to find out which ones have noteworthy skill and have them begin to serve Ainz-sama. That's Ainz-sama for you. His insight runs so deep, I'm sure that it's only the tip of the iceberg too. While Nia did not know what this plan was that Ainz was working towards, hearing others praise him made her quite happy. As she listened, she reached for one of the snacks on the table as she finished her drink. It looked like a loaf of bread with a thin layer of brown on the top. While she would normally be adverse to try it, the drink she had been given from Shizu had thrown what she knew about food out the window. She went to take a bite and as expected, it was delicious. Indeed, he truly is someone who was worthy to rule the other supreme beings. It's no wonder Touch-Me-sama was overjoyed to return to such a glorious person. Suddenly, Lupus Regina snapped up from her relaxed position as she seemed to remember something. Oh, by the way, I heard from one of the regular maids that Albert Alan Odal-sama has returned to Nazarick. The response was immediate and noticeable as the group of women began to fidget around anxiously while saying such things like another one, or so soon after. And so on. Nia, who had no idea what to make of it, continued to listen in silence. Truly we are lucky to be able to serve beings as generous as them. But you have to wonder, if two supreme beings return this close to one another, does that mean that they will all return one day? While Solution was just guessing, the idea brought the mood in the air to skyrocket, as the thought of being by the side of one's creator was something that no denizen would overlook for even a second. I hope that is the case and we can prove worthy enough to receive such an honor. I truly hope Yumeko-sama is happy with all I have accomplished. We must strive to repay that gift Ainz-sama has given us by staying with us to the end with the utmost loyalty. Perhaps if we show enough, our creators will return to us. The atmosphere suddenly grew heavy. While it wasn't necessarily sad, it wasn't joyous either. Hopeful, perhaps? Feeling rather left out, Nia asked the question that had been on her mind for the entire time. If I may, who are these supreme beings? From what she was able to gather, they were related to Ainz in some way, but what way remained to be seen. Without missing a beat, a stream of information and praise came from Yuri to explain the question. I'm glad you asked, Nia. The Supreme Ones are the highest existence that we must eternally serve. For it was they who created Nazarick and all of its denizens, including us. And so we must strive to repay that with our utmost loyalty. There are 41 of the Supreme Beings in all, with Ainz-sama standing as their leader. And while Ainz-sama was the only one to stand with us until the end, we still hope our respective creators will return someday.
And recently, Touch Me Sama and Albertalanodal Sama have returned to us all, and so that fills us with hope that they will return.
There is nobody greater than the Supreme Ones.
While Yuri had been very prim and proper the entire time she had been with her, this was the most passionate she had ever seen her in the short time they had known one another. So this must be something she believed in with all her heart. Still, one thing didn't make sense in all that.
What do you mean by created? Just that. We were once nothing, and now we exist.
And we shall use that existence to carry out their will.
But that would make them like gods. Precisely. Ainz Sama and the rest of the Supreme Being are our gods. It is only right to see them as such, for if those who can give us life are not gods, then who can claim to be? What more could Nia say?
She had already seen him as a perfect being who was the incarnation of justice, but after hearing from his confidants that he was truly a living god in the flesh, or bone as it were, all she could do was give thanks that he had chosen her to carry out his will during the war. And that she had chosen to spread his great name to all who wished to hear. It was only fitting for a new god to take the stage when the old ones allowed such atrocities to happen. That is also why we do not care of the habits of others in Nazarick. For if the Supreme Beings decided it should be so, then who are we to argue?
While this was all very fascinating to Nia, something wasn't adding up. While I don't doubt your words, weren't you all demons under the employ of Jaldabaoth? How could you have been created here if that was the case? Immediately, the faces of the maids turned to worry and uncertainty.
While she had hoped this was not a troublesome topic, she needed to know how this all tied together. She was hoping it was not the worst-case scenario, of Jaldabaoth being one of these supreme beings. After a substantial amount of time had passed, one of the maids, Solution, had suddenly changed her expression to a smile in the blink of an eye before she started her explanation. Well you see, Ainz Sama had not mentioned this earlier to the Holy Kingdom because it would throw needless suspicion on himself, but Jaldabaoth actually used his magic to steal us away from Ainz Sama's allegiance. He was planning on rescuing us already, but the Holy Kingdom coming to his aid was an opportunity for him to find and save us. He had chosen to hide the fact that we were already loyal because it would seem like he was orchestrating the whole thing. Which would have prevented the Holy Kingdom from being saved and possibly started a war with the Sorcerer Kingdom.
Why yes, that's exactly right. Thank you Solchan.
It was like a hammer had hit Nia straight in the face with how obvious everything seemed in hindsight. The reason why he had accepted a meeting with the delegation so soon, the reason why he had come in person, why Shizu had been able to procure so many high-class items, as well as have access to the Sorcerer King's pocket dimension. It all made so much sense. Because they had been loyal to him all along. I am the king of the Sorcerer Kingdom, and not the king of the people who reside in this country, thus I can calmly make this decision. I would choose to save 1,000 people's lives over a single life. But if this boy alone were a citizen of my nation, I would prioritize saving him instead. The Sorcerer King's words echoed in her head, and she almost was on the verge of tears. How merciful of a man was he? Fighting the most powerful demon the world had ever seen for the sake of his people. He was truly someone who was a king of kings, and if their words were to be believed, a god of gods. He truly is the greatest being in existence.
Whatever are you stating the obvious for? Now anyways, if the other supreme beings do return, who would come back first?
Obviously it would be Hiro-Sama, as I believe I have made great strides as a battlemaid, as well as a great help to Ainz Sama in Ainz.
I think you mean Genjiro-sama. No, Hiro-Sama.
As Nia watched the two sisters bicker with each other, she could not help but feel grateful to Ainz for allowing her to meet Shizu, and become a subordinate. Earning the trust and respect of a god was an immense honor. And not only had she been saved by Ainz, but by Touch Me as well.
There is nobody greater than the Supreme Ones, huh? I think they may be right.
Well, I'll just have to follow their example and be as loyal as I possibly can. She continued to listen to their conversations, eager to learn about the other supreme beings that she would now serve.
The world of 2138 was a bleak one.
Many had lost hope for the future with one look at the decrepit world they found themselves in. Smog covered the majority of the world, making the air practically unbreathable, and any spots that were clear of contaminants were seen as luxury tourist traps, and cost so much that an average person would not be able to go there in their lives. The majority of the population sought to alleviate this despair by losing themselves in MMORPGs and other virtual escapes. This, however, was a way for corporations to keep everyone in check. By providing ways to enjoy themselves, they could cause the masses to feel comfortable with their predicament. As long as I have this, I'll be fine, and so on were the types of things they longed to hear. Others who did not engage in these activities choose to lose themselves in work, with the false promise of rising higher in the corporate ladder to have a better life than the one they lead. This was the other way they kept the world in their grip. The cogs in the machine would keep turning if they had sufficient motivation. A carrot and stick. These were the two archetypes you would tend to find in this now destroyed world. Those who would strive to escape their bleak future through games, and those who would try in vain to escape that future, reaching for a goal they would never attain. Indeed, this was how the people of Earth would spend their short lives. Some would try to hide from reality, and some would give their best to serve. And others? Ah yeah, that one's going in my favorites. Would utterly waste them. Let me just save that one, let's see. 267296, alright, done. This man, known to his confidants as Peroroncino, had just finished what he would call living. While in the future, pornography was still a market, it had somewhat stagnated due to its shifting toward virtual reality. Many would agree that this was worse than the old manual way of doing it, as touch had not been well developed for VR yet, and in the end, not much would be felt for the recipient. As such, men of culture, such as himself, would scour the internet in search of old relics that had been left behind. While they were still being made today, the sheer number of them meant that valuable masterpieces had been lost to time, and it was people like him who sought to find them for himself. Be it H games or in a manga, he thoroughly enjoyed the hunt. Well, now that that's done, what should I do for the rest of the day? Peroroncino was somebody who liked to deal with things as they came his way, and rarely plan ahead, so his daily life reflected that, essentially acting on whatever his desires wanted at that moment. So he often hopped from one thing to another. Maybe you could actually be useful to society for once, one each on? The childish voice that had said this cutting remark was a girl who inhabited the same house as him, something rarely seen with his kind. This girl was known to the masses as Kazumi Kumi, an extremely popular voice actress for a variety of anime-related things, and would also happen to be the older sister of the man. You're one to talk. You voice some of these things, why criticize me for enjoying them, huh? Because what I do is actually a job, and what you do and sink further and further into degeneracy. I really don't even know how you're making money off that. Peroroncino would often blog about some of the treasures he found on popular sites that were filled with similar people to himself. While he did make a small amount of money from donations, he also worked as a translator for such works. Therefore, he oftentimes had an ample amount of money on hand, since his needs were relatively low. Hey, just because I can appreciate the finer things and you can't doesn't make me any less of a human. You sure? Honestly, just keep your habits in your den of degeneracy and keep it away from me. Yeah. Seeing that he had his fill for the day, he went downstairs to enjoy himself in some other way. While he had some ideas, nothing seemed to be truly appealing. While he may ask Kaze for ideas, he would most likely get a sarcastic comment in response, so he held his tongue. Welp, time for old reliable, go to VR and scroll through until I find something better to do. While he rarely played games, his headset was filled with every visual novel imaginable. He would usually play one, then proceed to not shut up about it for a week, bugging his sister with his newest waifu, and then get bored after seeing a new one, and thus, the cycle would repeat. As he began to flip through the library of literature, his sister had interrupted his session. What do you think you're doing? I was planning on using that, you know? Don't you have your own? Why bug me about this now? Because mine is getting repaired after what you did earlier. So suck it up and give it. What she was alluding to was what happened a week ago during one of their scuffles. She had asked him to grab her purse, which was near him, and in response, he had haphazardly thrown it to her, which he claims she could have caught easily. It, however, hit the table behind her, which her VR set was resting on, which had caused its ruin. And both sides continue to argue on whose fault it was.
I think you mean what you did. Don't blame me because you can't catch something to save your life.
As he began to drown out her uproar of comebacks, he had noticed a very familiar icon hidden within his stash.
Yggdrasil? How is that here?
From what he remembered, it had shut down.
Roughly 2 years ago. If so, was this a second version?
While it was hardly rare for popular games to get sequels,
they would not come out this frequently. Then if that wasn't the case, what was it?
I hope it is. And besides, once I'm in, she can't argue with me anymore, 'cause I'll already be using it.
Ha! His course set, he made to open the DMMO and enjoy the rest of his day.
And at the same time, his sister had grabbed the helmet away from him to end the argument then and there.
Really a useless brother like you should just least.
And then, darkness came over him.
Alright then, let's get this started.
As an avid player of Yggdrasil early on, Perorancino was quite excited to have a new version out for him to play. A game where you can only become strong through trial and error always is an exciting thing.
You would either improvise, or you would falter. And the race always thrilled him.
Now then, hold on, what? As he went to go to the start menu, he realized that he was already put into the game, and not only that, but he also was in his old character's avatar. Which could only mean that this wasn't a new version.
But if so, then why was he already in the game?
That's pretty weird,
but not only that, this doesn't look like a starting area. What is this place?
As far as the eye could see, there was nothing alive on this mountain of rubble and ash. Skeletons of various animals and humans littered the ground, while dust blew in the wind, as if to show the fate of all that enter this place. It was barren of anything that possessed life, even plants would not grow here. Perorancino did not know this, but this place was known as the Mountain of the Dead, a place that even adamantite adventurers feared to travel near. All who entered this place were said to perish and would never be seen again.
Some believed it to be a curse.
Others thought it was mere superstition. Only a few select individuals knew the truth about this place, and they would rightfully fear it. Indeed, for this was the home of a world-shaking calamity. This is probably a trick from those shitty devs. What is having people spawn in a random area of the world their idea of exploring now? Wow, they really are shitty, aren't they? All games would have you spawn in a hub, or at least a low-leveled area to get your bearings, but it would seem that Yggdrasil's devs were more unforgiving than he remembered.
He honestly never thought they would go this far. Is this supposed to be a punishment to experienced plays? Like, you know how to play, so try and find your way out? That's so unfair.
Assuming that he was now level 1, since the game had shut down, it would be far too unfair to have him thrown in areas that were likely to have high-level enemies or inhospitable environments with dangerous effects. And it would seem he had landed in an area that had met both of those requirements. As he was considering if he should just respawn and try to land somewhere better, the ground beneath him began to shake, and boulders that were resting on the incline above him started to roll down, creating an avalanche or rubble. It would seem that the cause was a pile of rocks that he had noticed slowly growing in size and crumpling with each new bit of elevation. Just as it reached its peak, an explosion of rubble showered the surrounding area with shredded rock, and the figure hiding under it had made itself known, wings outstretched. At first glance, one might be forgiven for thinking that it was a skeletal dragon, a dangerous threat in its own right, but comparing a mere pile of bones to this monstrosity would be a most foolish course of action. A black fog covered most of its body, sparkling like the night sky, and it seemed to be taking the form of the dragon's scales. As it covered the entire top of its body, leaving only the stomach and bottoms of the legs to show off its bony carapace. Two green eyes glowed with a roaring hot malice, seemingly lit by a flame that not even the coldest of waters could put out. Its wings were also made of bone, but an ethereal, purple substance, presumably negative energy, served the purpose of its wing membrane, which also had the side effect of damaging any living organisms caught in the wind they picked up. A truly fiendish creation that would make one question if a god even existed to allow such a creature to exist. Gufandara Argoros. This dragon had been born in the peak of the Dragon Lord's power. While he had not been as strong as his siblings, nor did he have access to wild magic, and therefore could not even come close to the power of the Dragon Lords of the time, he was almost unrivaled when it came to knowledge. He learned about the world and all things that would exist within it. Not for any reason like storing power or practical use, he simply found it interesting. This was how he had chosen to live his life, but he did not regret it. The others respected his choice, as strong dragons were a dime a dozen, therefore none forced him to seek out power, and as such, he never did. That is, until the 8 Greed Kings came. With their unrelenting might, they cut a bloody swath across the world, destroying nations and species underfoot, and with their mighty artifacts and abilities, even the Dragon Lords were no match, and soon found themselves falling to them as well. Due to this, the dragons all decided to put their differences aside, and would team up to slay this menace that now populated their world. Save for one. As Gufandara was not powerful, the other dragons saw him as merely a hindrance, unable to fight, and with no magic, they had cast him away from the few that were left, with some even suggesting he be used as a sacrifice. With no way to defend himself, he was forced to oblige them, and had left them to their own devices, to retreat onto a lush mountaintop, where he would choose to reside for the rest of his days. But this isolation did nothing to quell the burning anger within his heart. The beings he had lived with his whole life, and some he would even dare to call friends, had cast him from his home despite not doing anything wrong. How dare they? They deserved to die. They would all die by his hand. Of course, this was seemingly impossible for one such as he, for without the primordial weapon known as wild magic, nor the artifacts of the kings, he could never even get close to one of them. However, as fate would have it, his wish may still be able to grant it due to one thing. Tier magic. The one thing that he was thankful the kings had done, they had used an unknown method to bring a new type of magic into the world. Not only was it easier to learn that wild magic, but anyone could learn it, regardless of race. The more intelligent you were, and the more you knew about magic, the more likely you would reach a higher tier. And luckily for him, that was his specialty. Not only that, but the other dragons hated its existence, so it would be the ultimate irony, destroyed by the thing they shunned. However, it was a known fact that the tier magic was largely inferior to wild magic in many ways. Even the kings had to use their most powerful spells to overcome the Dragon Lords. Thus, he had to learn and become as strong as he could. Secluded in his cave, he practiced his spells day and night, and was able to reach the 3rd tier after very little time, but he soon hit a roadblock. While his spells were quite powerful, they were not able to reach their true potential, as he rarely studied the art of combat. However, he had learned that due to his race, a black-scaled dragon, he was able to cast negative energy magic with increased proficiency. Armed with that knowledge, he began to undergo a ritual that would allow him to become an undead, and with his powerful knowledge, race, and racial abilities, he was able to become a creature of legend. One of the most powerful undead. A night lich. With his newfound power, he began to absorb the life force from every living thing on the mountain in an effort to grow stronger, be it sentient or not. The mountain's once luscious greens turned to dull browns and grays, as the world around it withered away. If anyone attempted to stop him, he would devour them too. Over the course of 300 years, he would ebb away at the planet's life force, bit by bit making him stronger. If one were to rank him in terms of difficulty rating, he would be at 150 by now. With his enhanced might and collective knowledge, he managed to break the borders of the known world and create an entirely new form of magic that used brainpower as opposed to magical might. This psychic magic was extremely deadly to foes who lacked defense against mental attacks, and through his mastery, even managed to reach the mythical realm of the 8th tier, where his ultimate attack resided. He was confident that nothing would be able to survive unscathed. Though this was the only spell he knew of such a high tier, even the 6th or 7th were beyond his normal abilities. And this is how he had lived, waiting for the day he felt strong enough to reach the domain of the Dragon Lords to make them pay for their actions. And it would seem that some new prey had entered his domain. While there were species of demi-humans that had features of birds, none came to mind that matched this one's appearance, and if his instincts were correct, it was a strong one. Wonderful. I'm certain that his life force will cause my strength to soar. How marvelous. Though he could see it was strong, it certainly wasn't at his level, and so he allowed his voice to reach the quivering lower life form. Behold, peon. You stand before the great Gufandara Argaros, master of unlife, and the strongest of all undead. Repent the folly of stepping into my domain. The result was always the same no matter who approached, be it adventurer or trader, all had fallen before his might and only existed to fuel his growth. What will he do now? Will he shout his intent to rid the world of my evil? Or will he try to negotiate for his life? Those are always my favorites, pleading with the undead? How foolish. While he had seemingly heard every type of response known to man, what was said next were completely outside the realm of his expectations. You shitty devs. What? That response was so far from his assumptions that he could only stare in shock for a moment. Honestly, he didn't even know what he had said. For instance, what were these devs? Of course, just making tons of unfair game design wasn't enough for you, was it? You just had to make starting out a pain as well, huh? Well, fine, I see how it is. I've got quite the strongly worded email for you when I leave here. As the creature began to ramble about things he couldn't even understand, it seemed to pick up a stone from the ground for whatever reason and began to talk again. What are you saying? Just fend for yourself with whatever lying around. Fine, I can beat a giant dragon with a stone, watch, and with that he tossed the piece of rubble straight at him. He's delusional. For one, he had been talking nonsense the entire time, as if not paying attention to the main point of interest, himself, this entire time. Either he was already crazy, or his fear had caused him to lose his mind. The second was the preposterous idea that a mere pebble would cause him harm. It merely flew a few feet in the air before falling harmlessly to the ground, allowing him to get a clear shot and subsequently devour its soul. At least, that's how it should have gone. Instead, the rock flew through the air faster than the eye could see, and smashed into the side of his head with the force of a warhammer. The sudden shock caused him to roar in pain while stumbling backwards. Part of his skull had been reduced to fragments after that strike, leaving a billowing smoke to escape from the openings. He was losing energy, and fast. I need to retreat and restore my energy before I die here. He no longer cared about the creature that attacked him. Clearly it was stronger than he could imagine. He was smart, nothing would matter if he died, he just needed to rest, and return to his cave to restore what he had lost. And with that, he burrowed into the ground, the fear of death still fresh in his mind, and with a new object of his ire. Huh? That was all Peroroncino could think after that had gone down. He had expected himself to die there, so he was acting all sarcastic before he did, since it was all he could think of at the time, but in the end, the opposite of what he was expecting had occurred. His strike had grievously wounded his opponent. While it was true that such arm strength was possible, that was only the case if he was. Am I still level 100? Certainly that would explain the events that had just occurred, but if that was the case, why? Yggdrasil shut down, so how could he retain his character? I'll just check the menu then, what? However, as he went to motion for his UI, he soon realized that it was non-existent. Even his health bar and map were no longer there. What the hell is going on? He was beginning to panic at this sudden revelation. And the more he was realizing that things were not normal, the more he began to notice. For instance, why could he feel the breeze blowing against his feathers? Why was the chill in the air so biting? Why was? No way. Had he been transferred into Yggdrasil? That couldn't be the case, could it? It's simply impossible. But if it was, then what was here with him? As he now tried to familiarize himself with his surroundings, he found that he was extremely high up in the mountains, thus he activated a skill which could only be taken by a birdman who had taken points in archer classes, Eagle Eye. This skill allowed him to see 5 kilometers out, and even possessed an optional crosshair for him to use as he saw fit. The land around him was seemingly just as barren. Snow-filled mountains made up the majority of his vision, with nothing that would signify any sort of life. As he was beginning to lose hope, he spotted a fortress near a large crack in the ground, inhabited by what seemed to be very short people. Aren't those dwarves? Dwarves were certainly a race in Yggdrasil, and what he sought here certainly fit the description. With their stout bodies and long beards, it would be the image anyone would think of when they heard the word dwarf. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration soon hit his mind as he began to realize the implications of his situation. If I'm really in Yggdrasil, doesn't that mean that races like succubi, sirens, and all other kinds of women are real now? Is my fantasy finally a reality? Is this heaven? Oi, dumbass brother of mine. What exactly are you looking at? Or not? Hearing that all too familiar voice had snapped him out of the dreamscape he had been envisioning himself in and instead gave him a mixture of emotions that could be narrowed down to happiness and displeasure. Happiness because she was here with him. And displeasure because she was here with him. Why are you immediately accusing me of stuff when I'm just trying to get my bearings? You're probably just as confused as I am right now, so what's the big deal? The problem is, as you may know, dear brother, slimes see through vibrations in the air instead of sight, and I'm noticing an awful lot of vibrations around your lower half, so care to explain what you were looking at? Shit. And now's not the time for that sort of thing. Like I said, we need to get our bearings, since we have just been thrown into a fantasy world due to some unknown phenomenon, so we should focus on finding our way around. Humph, nice excuse. Well, you're right, so I'll let you off the hook this time. And speaking of, what even happened to cause this? Last I remember, you were in the VR set, then when I went to grab it, everything went dark, and now we're here. Pero Roncino began to recant his side of the events, from him seeing Yggdrasil's icon in the games he had, him clicking on it, to the sudden appearance of the dragon. This explanation prompted a scoff from Buku Buku Chagama. Figures that you would be the one to cause all this to happen. Can you never just do anything right, Oni-chan? What? You're blaming me for this mess? How am I supposed to know that the isekai genre went from fiction to based on a true story? All I did was click on the icon out of curiosity. It's your own fault for being here because you tried to grab it when I rightfully had it. Are you serious? You're pinning it on me now? And so the once empty, silent wasteland of the dead became filled with the sounds of pointless arguing that seemed liable to wake the corpses from their eternal slumber. Yet after some time, the incessant bickering finally began to die down for now, and the emergence of an actual conversation could be heard. Well, we'll continue this later. For now we need to find a way to get out of here. And I think I know just where to go. Do you? And how would you know that? As it would happen, ye of little faith, when you had disturbed me earlier, I was looking around for some signs of civilization in this area, and as it would happen, I found it. Over in that direction about 3 kilometers, there was a fortress of some kind, and with it was a group of dwarves. The slime merely turned slowly towards him, and with a mocking face, probably, said, "You know I can't see that far out, right? Whatever, just trust me on this, okay? Well, just head down there and ask some question on where we are, alright? While I don't know how I feel in entrusting you, it seems we don't have any other option right now. Fine, let's go. You really need to lay off the insults, you know that? Why?" And so the air once again ignited with the heat of their spat, which would continue for the entirety of their walk to the fortress. Looks like I win again. The dwarf who had shouted that was one of the many troops garrisoned at the fortress outside the city of Fiojara. Since rarely any action was seen nowadays, many of the soldiers found themselves getting bored with the large amount of standby time. The Quagoa had been dealt with, though they would never have attacked in the daylight anyways. The beast usually stuck to the forest, and most nations did not know of its location. So it was rare the dwarves would ever need to actually battle. Though there was another reason for this. It's a little suspicious that this is now the 3rd time you've won in a row, Rain. Are you sure you're not cheating? I think you're just mixing up cheating with skill. Now pay up. The dwarves all around him somewhat begrudgingly gave their bets to the winner of the game they had just lost at. While he had said he hadn't been cheating, he was only partially telling the truth. He was using a little-known technique known as card counting to win, though there was no need to tell them that.
Man, and I was hoping to get a drink after work too.
Sigh, better hold off then. Though I don't even know if this can even be considered work with those fellas up here. His thumb jerked back to the walls of the fortress at two beings that seemed to be large in every possible meaning of the word. These were in fact undead loaned to them by the Sorcerer Kingdom. Whatever issues somehow managed to pop up, they could take care of with ease. They would take a stance whenever something approached the garrison, which had them double as sentries for the dwarves. So that meant that all the dwarves stationed here could relax and wait until something did happen to show up.
I know, right?
Who knew that creatures of such strength could be controlled?
They're just so damn strong. Remember when the Phoenix Lord came down and spotted us? I thought we were done for.
Yeah, how could we forget? Who knows what would have happened otherwise? The incident in question happened a few weeks prior.
One of the rulers of Mtirapaslia, its power was considered one of the greatest in the Azurlisia mountain range.
Though it rarely comes down this low, it must have been looking for prey due to a shortage. While the dwarves quickly fell into panic and were ready to die then and there, the two undead had managed to fun of the creature and caused it to flee back into the mountains. From then on, nobody questioned their power.
Well, regardless, it's all thanks to the Sorcerer Kingdom for that.
I've actually been saving up to take a trip there, as I hear their food is just delicious.
And after this game, it looks like I have enough. Wow, lucky you. Looks like you worked real hard to save up that much.
The dwarf simply flashed his friend a grin as they began to set up the cards once more. However, before they could finish, the distinct sound of metal clattering could be heard. That had meant that the undead had spotted something. While they would be fine with staying down here since they were confident that they could deal with anything, they still needed to verify if it was a traveler and let them through.
Well, I guess I'll see what's got them all riled up this time. Don't start without me. Then don't take too long.
With that, he began to ascend the steps of the tower to see who the unannounced visitor was. While there was a scheduled drop-off of goods today from the Sorcerer Kingdom, the undead would not have acted, so it must be something else.
What could it be this time?
As he looked over the balcony, he had seen the people in question. While the Sorcerer Kingdom had accepted a large amount of species into its fold, many who lived outside its walls were not used to seeing them. So there was still a bit of shock that was present to outsiders. After seeing the two, the first thing he had though was confusion. While they had no weapons and were alone, that was not enough to curb his suspicion.
For one of the entities was a slime.
These creatures were known to be non-intelligent, basically acting on instinct. While there was a wide variety of them, such as fiber-eating slimes and sewer slimes, none had ever grown to be larger than large rocks other than particularly noteworthy individuals such as kings. But this one appeared to be the size of a human, or even a bit taller. The other one appeared to be some kind of bird man. While it was not unpleasant to look at, it seemed to radiate an air of beauty despite not doing anything due to its coloration. It was a mixture of gold and white, with long black hair. At first glance, it seemed to be intelligent given the way it was moving. Was the slime some kind of utility creature for the road or?
Excuse me, Dwarsan. My name is Perorancino, and this is Buku Buku Chagama. It would seem we have gotten a bit lost in the mountains. Could you please tell us where we are at present? It would be a great help. Ah, so that's the story. If directions was all they needed, then he could happily assist them. This is the stronghold outside the city of Theogera. If you're looking for directions back to a city, then the closest place would probably be the Sorcerer Kingdom to the south. If you are willing to travel a ways more though, the Empire is a bit further out in the east.
I see. Well, we had run out of supplies recently, so would it be possible for us to enter the city to restock?
Pretty please?
The one who had said that was the slime, which had come as a huge shock. Not only the fact that it was intelligent, but the high-pitched voice was so far from his expectations for the monster, that he was stunned for a few seconds. Once he regained his composure, he answered them as best he could. Well, I'd have to check with the others, but if there seems to be no problems, then sure. With that, he went back to inform the dwarves of the new arrivals, hearing a muffled "so you were staring at them? I didn't realize you swung that way," which was followed by some kind of retort most likely. When he reached the room and informed them of the visitors, surprise filled their faces as he told them who was there, but a general consensus had been reached. He went back up to notify them of the arrangement with a few others in tow. "While would be more than happy to accommodate you, you're unknown to us all, so in exchange for passage, could we ask a favor from you?" "What would that be?" "In an hour from now, the Flat Chest Vampire Airlines is scheduled to drop off some goods here, so could we ask you to help us transport them down to Fiojero with us?" The other party had stood still and silent for a length of time after that. While it was not long enough to warrant a repeat of the question, it was still long enough that brought about uncomfortable awkwardness. Yet the silence was soon broken with another question. "The what?" "Ah, yes. It's relatively new, so I don't think you would have heard of it, but we have recently begun trade with the Sorcerer Kingdom, and they utilize frost dragons to carry the goods between nations. It's actually quite ingenious when you think about it. They can't be robbed because the dragons can fend for themselves and would scare off thieves, and traveling by the air means they can make it here in extremely short time. It's great." "That's not what, never mind. We'd be happy to help." While he could sense they still had something on their mind, he chose to ignore it for now, as he had no need to pry deeper. Since they had agreed to cooperate, they had held to their side of the deal and opened the gate. Though with that came a new type of caution, as they had walked past the undead without so much as a glance. That either meant that they had seen them before, or they could handle them in a fight. While he did not think that the latter was a possibility, he had filed it away in his mind as a precaution. Soon enough, the pair had walked with them all into the landing zone. Since they had some time to spare, they had decided to pass the time with the newcomers. "Well, since it will most likely be a while before the supply drop is here, why don't we have a card game while we wait?" "I'm down. How about you, Chagama?" "I'm fine with it. It beats waiting around doing nothing." "Then it's settled. Though I warn you, I'm pretty good. I haven't lost a match all day." The taunt seemingly fell on deaf ears, as the avian merely responded with, "Then I guess I'll just have to take that title from you." Though he could not read its expressions well, it most likely had a smug look. Now challenged, the game was set in motion, and by the end of it, he had made do on his promise and had managed to beat the dwarf, much to his chagrin. Even though he had found a technique to win games easily, Pero Roncino seemed to find a way around it. "Well, it looks like I've won. How did you manage to do that anyhow? He's been beating us all day, but you just came in and defeated us all like it was nothing." "Well, it's a little trick I've learned called card counting. You simply assign a card with a value, like a number, and keep tabs on how many have been taken from the pile already, and use the values to learn what the other players have based on what is left from your calculations. It's not cheating as it takes skill, but it gives you quite the advantage." "Ah, so you knew about that method too then?" Realizing what he just admitted to, he soon found glares from the dwarves that were present being directed at him, now knowing how he had won all those times. Anyhow, it seems that the dragons are in view. Looks like the supplies have arrived." Sure enough, it would seem that a flight of 5 different dragons was making their way to the fortress. Each one seemed to be carrying a large amount of crates and other assorted fare. As they landed, their imposing frame became all the more clearer, with the one exception being a dragon who had tiny glasses on his snout, with a large amount of fat on his body. While it may appear humorous, it was still one of the strongest species in the world, so its looks did not matter much. "Well now, since the supplies and food have arrived, let's get to work bringing them down to the city." Since Pero Roncino had promised them that he would assist in carrying the supplies, he happily obliged. Since he was of quite a high level, his arm strength was more than sufficient to make this menial task child's play. The dwarves around him expressed shock at how easily he was able to carry the large boxes that would have normally needed to be unpacked, then taken out individually. However, as they began to head for the large crack in the mountain, a loud, bell-like voice rang forth. "Pero Roncino-sama." Shocked at the sudden development, he had turned around to see who had said such a thing, and when he did, his blood turned to ice. Standing by the dragons was a short, petite girl. Her eyes seemed to glow a deep crimson, and silver hair that gleamed in the sun descended from her headdress. Her outfit seemed to be a very deep purple with white frills outlining it, and appeared to be a gown of some sort. And finally, her face was a pale white, and seemed to be the incarnation of beauty. But despite all of this, none of it surprised him. For he had already seen her before. Indeed, as he had made her back in Yggdrasil.
Hey Peroroncino, isn't that?
He wasn't able to hear the rest of her sentence, as he soon passed out from the overwhelming emotions that had consumed him.
Ugh, what time is it?
As Peroroncino groggily rose up from his slumber and slowly regained his conscious thoughts, he began to recollect what had just transpired.
Man, what a weird dream. Well, whatever. I'm up now and ready to forget it. But is it just me, or are these sheets a little too comfortable?
While he still had a comfortable bed, it was almost never made, and could only be described as run-of-the-mill. However, the softness he was feeling right now could be likened to velvet. It was almost heaven. While he was confused at the development, he was even more confused at why his hand was now a claw. Then the memories came rushing back, and with it, the realization that he wasn't dreaming.
And if that was the case, then... it seems you're finally up, Peroroncino. His thoughts were suddenly interrupted by an unknown voice.
When he turned to look, however, he suddenly saw a small group of heteromorphic beings.
A overlord, a Baphomet, a knight, and a slime.
Most people would be panicked at such a sight, but to him, this was one of the greatest things he could have hoped to see right now.
Momonga-san, Albert-san, and even Touch-san. What are you all doing here?
Logically speaking, if he really had been transferred into Yggdrasil, it was extremely unlikely they would find him. The worlds of Yggdrasil were extremely vast, almost the size of Earth, and adding on top the other 9, combined with the various different dimensions, finding him would be an arduous task even if they knew he was here? So how did they find him? Truth be told, none of us know the answer to that question, as it seems Chagama-san explained what transpired, and it seems we've all had similar stories on how we ended up here. Though the cause remains to be seen. We were actually planning on figuring that out when Shaltir informed us that she found you in Chagama-san. Hearing that name just reaffirmed his fears that she now existed, but he couldn't just start to freak out about this now.
Well, that's all well and good, but where are we now?
The great underground tomb of Nazarick. He had stated this like it was the most normal thing in the world. Granted, he may have been here for much longer than him, but still, that was a huge bomb to drop. The fact that the veritable heaven they had all created was now a real place that existed, was a truly exciting prospect.
That's amazing.
Though he couldn't tell what expression almost all of them wore, he could tell they were smiling in agreement.
Indeed it is Peroroncino-san. But before we go any further, I would like to ask you a question. We are currently looking for a way back to Earth so that Touch-san may be able to return, but only he right now is planning on going. If the opportunity arises, would you like to go with him? The question surprised him, due to how drastically the topic had been thrown at him, but once he realized just what was asked, he thought to himself, do I really want to go back? He thought of the perks of his life now, and how it was in the past. What he might gain, and what he might lose. And after thinking of the implications of it, he had reached a definitive answer. Hell no. I'm going to second that opinion. I figured as much. After all of us didn't really have much to live for, did we? Well, no matter, it is good to have you two back. Well, Momonga-san, now that he has been caught up to speed, what should we do now? Should we laze around Nazarick for a while?
While that does sound appealing, Albert-san, I feel like we've done enough of that as is for the past week. We should probably get on with finding out just what has caused this. Of course, Peroroncino, if you'd like, you can meet Shaltir while we try figuring this all out.
I'm good.
The reply was immediate, without a shred of hesitation. The forcefulness shocked a lot of those surrounding him, so he quickly explained his actions. Well, I kind of just made her backstory just for fun, like not being serious, and screwing around by having her be whatever fetishist I could think of. But now that I know she is real, it kind of makes me feel ashamed that I made her like that. Like it is unfair she has a personality like that because of me. As you should. Really, you truly are useless. Why would you make something like that in the first place? Even if you didn't know this was going to happen, you should have just made her normal. But instead, you choose to act on your desires, and look what happened. You should just see her and accept your fate. Though no one else said anything, he felt like they agreed with her, and if he was honest, he kind of did too, just a little. Come now, don't be so hard on him, Chagama-san. We all just had fun with our creations, so we can't just blame each other for what we choose to do with them. You're right, but still. Anyhow, he will have to meet her eventually, and she's not as bad as he probably thinks. Well, seeing as he has put her aside for the time being, why don't you go and meet the twins? Immediately, the predator had become the prey as she was put in the spotlight. While her expressions were hard to read, due to being made out of slime. Some parts could still be defined, and due to that, it was clear she was pursing her lips. Well, you see. What is this? You try to shame me and then get all flustered when your decisions are brought into question? Traps are completely different from making a girl full of fetishes. Besides, didn't you say we shouldn't judge others for their creations, Mamanga-san? What, I mean, yeah, but... Hey, don't throw this on him. And besides, you still made fun of me while defending yourself. If you want to. Okay, we get it. You're both weird. Can we stop this now? The rather cold comment was stated by Albert to quiet both parties down, as they were both essentially just being hypocrites to one another. Everyone else agreed with this, so nobody censored him for this remark outside of the siblings. After all parties had finally agreed to the consensus of let bygones be bygones, the decision of what to do still needed to be made. Albert seemed to be the first to give his opinion. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to stay in the tomb for the time being. I've only been here for about a day now, and haven't even gotten the chance to enjoy the place like you guys, so for this one, count me out. That's fine, Albert-san, it's your choice after all. What about the rest of you? I'm going to go with you, Mamanga. For one, I really want to forestall my meeting with Shaltir as long as possible, and I would also like to get a better view of the outside world. Plus I may get to see some monster girls out there as well, hee hee. I'll second that opinion, Pero. While I don't have the selfish opinion of not wanting to see my creations, I would still like to help Touch-san, as well as figure out just how we ended up in this situation. Alright then. What about you, Touch-san? I think I'll sit this one out. I would like to talk with Seabass and the others a bit more. Plus, I don't really think you need me from what I've been told. Even though he didn't need to have a good reason to stay behind, it was hard to refute his words. With Ainz, Pararancino, and Buku Buku Chagama, their party would consist of a wildcard, an attacker, and a tank. While a perfect party in Yggdrasil would also consist of a healer, seeker, and another attacker, that was going off of their terms. With this world-level balance being so out of proportion, even one of them could be considered perfect. But while this world's abilities were still unknown, they needed to be cautious. But they should be fine with this much at least. Then it's settled. Me, Chagama and Pararancino will head out after hearing Demiurge's explanation, and once that's settled, we can move out from there. And Pararancino, we took the liberty of grabbing your items while you were passed out. Here, with a grand whoosh, and a swing of the arm, golden armaments suddenly filled the space in between the two in an instant. The glitter of them seemed to make the already glamorous room seem that much more impressive. What, didn't I tell you it was okay to sell them all? How are they still here? I simply couldn't bring myself to do it, Pararancino. While I could have sold them, I had always hoped that you would one day return to Yggdrasil once again, so I had kept them in safekeeping until now. Well, not that I'm complaining. Right now this is exactly what I wanted. Though he felt sadness at his friend's words, he wanted to try on his gear of old instead of losing himself in his emotions. That could wait for another day. As he equipped his panoply of magic items and weaponry, he began to glow due to the many cosmetic effects he had equipped into his data slots. If he had appeared before a person in this state, 9 out of 10, he could probably convince them that he was a god who had descended.
That's much better. Well then, what are we waiting for? Let's head out and explore like the good old days. Indeed. I'm looking forward to this quite a bit. Say Albertsan, where did Demiurge run off to after your conversation?
Well, he said he had some business to attend to back in the 7th floor.
He's probably still there if you want to catch him.
Alright then, with that let's conclude this guild meeting here. Though everyone laughed at that joke, it still made the mood in the air feel warm. As if something they had all missed had finally returned.
Ah, I've missed this feeling.
Ainz was thinking over the course of events that had just transpired, and could not help but feel enlivened. With each new member, each new comrade that entered the new world, the more it was beginning to feel like he had actually returned to the old days of Yggdrasil, where there were no worries and he could enjoy himself. Although, while he had enjoyed talking with everyone again, the fact that both of the siblings did not want to see their creations again caused him to feel somewhat saddened. He had spent a great deal of time with them, and had come to care for them very much, and knew the amount of love the NPCs had for their creators.
Aura and Mare especially. If one removed the cross-dressing, they would just be normal children.
He could not help but feel a bit irked with the way she was choosing to avoid them for a bit. Though he said nothing because he didn't want to start anything for no reason, and because they would eventually meet, he couldn't help but hold a slight feeling of annoyance due to that.
Well, that's a problem for future Ainz.
It can't be helped if they have these opinions right now since they're going off of their own visions of them.
It will be fine when we eventually cross that bridge. But enough of that. Let's get moving. Truth be told, Ainz was incredibly excited to go on this journey. Even if it was just to a distant city, it still reminded him of the old days in Yggdrasil, exploring the unknown. When Peroroncino had mentioned that, he earnestly agreed with him in a second.
Not to mention, that the fact that the guild members were showing up this rapidly had great implications for the future.
This is truly bliss. HM? You say something, Momonga-san? Oh, no, just talking to myself. Ah, I see. Well, anyway, Momonga-san, before we head out, why are we going to the 7th floor?
We're going to see Demiurge, as his knowledge is truly the greatest in all of Nazarick. If anyone knows where we need to go, it's him.
Alright then. Well, since we've just been walking and talking, we haven't gotten very far, huh? Let's just teleport already. You're right. I had almost forgotten that was an option.
Well then, as he said this, he lifted a bony finger to the air, displaying the proof of one's allegiance to the guild, the ring of Ainz Ilgaun, out in the open.
To the blazing inferno.
And with that unnecessary shout, the trio vanished into thin air, their destination being the greatest mind in all of Nazarick.
That's it for today. Remember to show your support to the creator of this story if you enjoyed it. If you would like more parts of the story to be uploaded, leave a comment and subscribe to get notified when the story continues. Bye-bye for now, and I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day.